Hey, remember that time I reviewed Xenoblade 3 and then proceeded to review the DLC a few months later? Remember when that definitely happened? Me? Forget? I would never. How dare you accuse me of such a thing? Well, anyways, it's now the 1 year anniversary of Xenoblade 3's Wave 4 DLC release, also known as Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Future Redeemed, a whole new story set in the world of Ionios, about 1,000 years before Xenoblade 3's base game events actually occur. See, instead of following a white guy with long hair and a cat girl, we now follow a white guy with longer hair and a cat girl. Obviously, before we begin, it should be obvious that there will be future redeemed spoilers ahead for the entire game, so if you care about spoilers and for some reason haven't beaten it yet, go do that and come back. We'll talk more about the story later, but for now let's dive straight in and talk about gameplay because I'm pretty sure that's a big part of the whole video game thing. So gameplay-wise, there's quite a lot to talk about. Future Redeemed introduces quite a bit of major additions that completely change up the core gameplay compared to base game Xenoblade 3. For example, a key feature within Xenoblade 3 is that characters can interlink in order to become these stronger, cool-looking demon guys called Ouroboros. While Ouroboros still exists in this story, this takes place before the power of the Ouroboros stone has been mastered, so as a way to still have some kind of special gimmick without it messing up the story, Future Redeemed introduces Unity skills. These are basically less powerful soul links, but they're still really interesting. They're still usable in chain attacks, luckily, and my favourite part about them is that you can create your own Unity combos by mixing and matching different characters, compared to the base game where, for example, Mio can only link with Noah, and Noah can only link with Mio. Personally, I chose to go with Matthew and A, Nicole and Glimmer, and Rex and Shulk, but you can really go with whatever fits your taste. There's also now a skill tree for each character titled Affinity Growth. This basically gives you another way to upgrade your characters, which is helpful as there's a few limits in Future Redeemed that I'll get into in just a second. There's 3 sets of skill trees for each character, with the price of a skill getting more expensive with each set. These can range from stuff like enhancing arts, learning and enhancing skills, enhancing talent arts, etc. You unlock the second and third sets by finding an Infinity Growth kit around the map. The best reason I can think of for this Infinity Growth feature, though, is most likely because upgrading and making your characters the best they can be is much more limited in this expansion. To start with, other than Niall, who isn't unlockable until post-game, heroes are gone from this. This isn't a bad thing since it's an expansion, but it is definitely a limit. You also can't swap around classes, so each character is stuck with the class they're given. Slots for master arts, accessories, and gems are also harder to get. Instead of unlocking through level progression, they now require the same method as Infinity Growth sets do. You can obtain different kits, and that's how you get more slots. I think this is pretty interesting as it requires more thought. You can only use 1 kit per character, so it's up to you to decide who you're going to use it on. This also, in general, helps to pad out the game a bit more. Another thing that's been added is a Collectopedia in order to go along with Affinity Growth, which is a really cool way to not only incentivize more exploration, but also engaging in combat and collecting stuff. Though, don't be an idiot like me and not realizing until writing this script that for the items to count in the Collectopedia, you actually have to trade them in. Anyways, there's also the new addition of manuals in the accessory slots. There's 3 different types of manuals: Tactics, Strategy, and Battle. These are primarily for chain attacks, and are actually pretty useful. One I found to be pretty helpful was Tactics Manual Volume 7. Upon completion of a character's chain, in my case Glimmer, it has an 100% chance to revive all downed party members, which was very good in the end fight, who got extremely close to wiping most of my team. Same with the final boss, who we will get into later, because I have a lot to talk about with that. I also found while writing this that there's a better version of this, which is Strategy Manual Volume 20. There's also a community feature, which I honestly kind of like. It allows you to connect with each of the characters within Colony 9 and makes them feel like real people, especially since they're only available during certain times of the day. Thankfully, this game doesn't function off of a real-world clock, so you just gotta wait a few minutes if there's an NPC you need that isn't currently active. I also think it's cool how some of these quests expand the colony more. For example, there's a Nopon called Bobobby you can find outside of Colony 9. If you help him out, he'll set up shop there. Or Georgie, who, when given the materials, builds a canteen. It all just helps make you feel actually immersed, and I love it a lot. It's also a big improvement over Torna's community system, and for the record, I'm actually a defender of Torna's community. I thought Torna's community being forced actually helped to make me more connected to Torna and its inhabitants, making the fall of Torna at the end of the game all the more heartbreaking knowing how many characters connected with likely died. However, I won't lie and say it definitely dragged the game out longer than it needed to be, which Future redeemed by making it almost entirely optional. Though I can't speak on the quality of the community itself because, to be completely honest, I didn't really do much of it. While this next thing isn't technically to do with gameplay, this is really the best place I can put it. The map is pretty interesting, but it is very linear. It is just an expansion though, so I can't really be mad at them for this. Plus, you can go back to previous locations a lot, especially Aurora Shelf and Yesterdale, as you're there for most of the game. Though I will say, Torna was definitely better in this area, as it had both Gormor and Torna to explore, compared to just Cent-Omnia in Future Redeemed. Another cool thing they added to upgrade characters in this game is weapon upgrading. If you talk to, who was it you talked to? Oh my fucking god, he's back. Ladies and gentlemen, the GOAT, the dude, the icon. One could even say that he is him. Riku is fucking back. But yeah, weapon upgrading is pretty cool. I don't really know what else to say. It's a good way to upgrade your characters. Finally, I need to speak about the overall bosses and difficulty of this game. I actually found this game to be much more difficult than base Xenoblade 3, and I honestly can't explain why. Maybe it's because of the lack of heroes or class switching, not really sure, but I definitely found this game to be harder, particularly when it came to the boss fights, and for the record, I am not saying this is a bad thing, this is simply just an observation I'm making. Continuing on though, the boss fights were fairly difficult, particularly the end fight at the end of Chapter 4, which, like I said, almost wiped my entire team, and also the final boss, which, the final boss can go fuck itself. The Elvis fight was actually pretty decent, it wasn't too difficult. The Alpha fight is just annoying. You have to stay on A for the entire time to make sure she doesn't use her talent art, or you have to hope your chain attack can charge in time due to a move Alpha can do, where he basically almost one-shots your entire team. But then there's also the issue of, oh boy, I sure do hope I time it right, because if you don't, it'll miss, and you won't be able to dodge the attack at all. This is incredibly bad when it's really not clear at all when you're supposed to time it. I kinda just guessed and got lucky with it. That's pretty much all I've got to talk about in terms of gameplay though, unless you really want to hear me talk about how they changed Hero Quest to Scenario Quest due to the lack of heroes in the expansion, meaning Hero Quest would make no sense.
That light.
No way! Drive it in! Release the power of Ouroboros! Shut the hell up already! I ain't taking orders! From you! Ah!
Okay, so this story just completely surprised me. At the time of playing this for the first time back in 2023, I had only played Xenoblade 3. I played a little bit of 2 and none of Torna. Now, obviously I've completed 2 and Torna, and the only Switch Xenoblade game I need to beat is Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition, at least until they port Xenoblade X, which they'll definitely do one day, just trust me on this please. So going into this, I really was not prepared for it to be a fully fleshed out story. And not only was I wrong, but it was a real fucking good one at that. I'll once again preface that this will include spoilers. So, without a doubt, this game has an insanely good cast. It's not my favourite personally, honestly, I prefer base game 3's and Torna's casts, but they're all really good, but I do think both of 3's casts have problems when it comes to sidelining. Which, to be fair, is perfectly understandable. When you're dealing with 6 characters, all with their own stories and backgrounds, it's hard for some not to get sidelined, even just a little. Future Redeemed's cast has it worse though, as compared to the main game only sidelining one character, that being Senna, Future Redeemed sidelines 2, and I apologize for starting this section negatively, but I really do want to get this out the way. Future Redeemed has 6 main, fully playable characters. Nael is a main character, but she's not fully playable other than for a single fight, and she just doesn't have as much screen time compared to everyone else. But that aside, the 6 main characters are Matthew, A, Nicole, and Glimmer, along with Shulk and Rex returning from Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 respectively. I particularly want to focus on Nicole and Glimmer here. I really feel like these two weren't as developed as the rest of the cast. Matthew has the whole thing with looking for and trying to save Nael. Shulk, Rex, and A are pretty focused on the whole fight with Mobius, while also acting like mentors for the other three, seeing how Shulk and Rex are pretty old by this point, and A is a fragment of Ontos, being stated as the in-between for the female Numa and male Logos. At first, Nicole and Glimmer have this thing of trying to fit in and unlock their Ouroboros powers, but it never feels as if they're up there with the rest of the cast. Going into this, I was sure I'd like them a lot more, but in the end, I just felt like they were just okay and the weakest part of the cast. But enough of that, let's talk about more of the positive parts of the story. First of all, I really do love Niall and Matthew's story. It's not as simple as just Niall wrong, Matthew right, because you kinda do understand Niall's reasoning. She acts as a figurative mother for the children of the city, and she's broken when she sees that they've been killed by Kavesi soldiers. She becomes the avatar for Alpha, and in return for her work, she's granted the ideal world, which is our world, the world before Klaus split into the worlds of Alrest and Bionis. But she's unable to see that the world she's given is never meant to be. Her character represents the human desire for a world where everything is perfect. But yet, ironically, paying attention to the huge Lordum radio during that scene in Chapter 5, the world is full of problems that she refuses to recognize, with the radio playing in the background telling us of human rights issues and people legit trying to leave the planet. Also, funnily enough, that radio also manages to completely link up Xenoblade X and Xenosaga 2, which is just insane fucking writing. I also think Shulk and Rex trying to come to terms with seeing their kids in the new world is pretty interesting to see. It's unfortunate Rex never got to meet his other two kids on Ionios, though, since they only show up thousands of years later. Those other two kids, by the way, obviously being Mio and the one and only, the fucking GOAT, Dirk, aka Console D, shout out Dirk Nation. It's also kinda cool, at least in my opinion, that by the time the main cast meet Rex and Shulk, they've not only grown up, but have already fought and been heavily damaged during the fight with Alpha. Rex loses an eye and Shulk loses an arm. It's a small thing, but it's still pretty neat to see. Rex in general is just my favorite character out of the cast. His intro is the most hype thing ever, and I love the callback to some of his most iconic moments in Xenoblade 2. Uncle Rex is like the best nickname for him too, because he really just give off that uncle vibe. Matthew is also easily my second favorite. I love how he's just a total dumbass who is all brawn with no brain, but also has an actual story to tell. He almost reminds me of Sokka from Avatar: The Last Airbender in a way. Both are total goofs, but have an emotional side to them and will do anything to protect their sisters. En also returns in this, like I said earlier, and he's not got too much going on here. It's mainly just to give us more context on the fall of the city, which is fine, because En's arc isn't supposed to happen for another 1,000 years, so it's to be expected. But I will say, Harry McEntire, like always, did an incredible job voicing En. Same with the entire voice cast, to be honest. Everyone clearly went all out here, and I couldn't be happier about it. Overall, this cast and story is incredibly strong. Again, there's issues with sidelining, but that's to be expected. The fact that for an expansion they have a story that is almost, in my opinion, on par with the story of the main game is really damn cool.
On Glimmer! Careful! I like your attitude, kiddo. Huh? Leave it to Uncle Rex. I'll show him a thing or three.
So overall, this game is fucking awesome. From the new gameplay mechanics helping to build the world and feel more immersed, to the story not only being an incredible send-off to the franchise, but a great story in general that provides a lot of background to the world of Ionios. There is something for everyone within this expansion, and I think it turned out incredibly well. No matter which game you liked more, you will probably end up loving this story expansion. It also helps that the soundtrack slaps too. I didn't talk about it much, but the OST is really insanely good, especially the battle music and the vocal theme Future Awaits. Honest to god, the fact that this was even an expansion and not its own separate game for £30 on the eShop is genuinely shocking. But it's really nice that not only do you get an entire story expansion, but you get tons of cool stuff for the main game, such as Rex and Shulk as heroes, and 2 extra heroes, thanks to this being part of the expansion pass. Monolith Soft is just genuinely carrying the Switch right now, and I think that needs to be recognized. With them working on all 3 Xenoblade games, plus Torna, and now Future Redeemed, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Splatoon 2 and 3, and finally Animal Crossing New Horizons, they've left a massive mark on the Switch, and I hope it stays that way continuing into the next Nintendo console, whatever that may be. With that being said though, I want to apologize for the lack of content lately, mainly this month, as I've decided I don't want to release low quality videos. I want each video to be released when I feel like it's good enough, and I've been getting more interesting and bigger ideas lately that cause videos to take way more time than they should. Hopefully you'll stick around despite that. Thank you all for watching, and happy 1 year anniversary, Xenoblade Future Redeemed.